For more than 2 decades, we've been educating our listeners about financial topics that are most important to you. Do you have enough money to retire? How will you keep from running out of money? What's your plan for managing market risk? What about taxes, inflation, and healthcare? Each week, we talk with an advisor at Lucia Capital Group about these issues and more. This is Managing Your Financial Future.
Well, thank you very large. Yeah, it's John Dean here, podcast host, and my good friend, Professor Rick Plum, certified financial planner professional, accredited wealth management advisor. We are managing your financial future, as you might have guessed or expected here from the title of the show. Welcome back. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We are going to be covering some regrets. Oh, my, regrets. But before I get to that, I just wanted to thank a listener and longtime listener, Mel, who and a couple of people actually did email us on I mentioned our 250th podcast episode it was dropped a few weeks ago, Rick Plum, but by the time it went out, we got some emails on that. So Mel, who had said he's been a listener since 2004, which wow, I appreciate that. Back when you had dark hair, I had blonde hair, and anyway, nice to have that. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Always good to hear from longtime listeners, too. And you can email us. I never mentioned this much, but you can email us if you go to the Lucia Cap website, LuciaCap.com, LuciaCap.com, and you can email us right there. If you have any questions or anything like that, remember, we get these emails after the shows air, so it can take 3 or 4 weeks, but we try to get to these. Anyway, I mentioned regrets. Rick, do you have any regrets?
Are you kidding me? Yes, and the list is long, but I'm not going to discuss them here. Thank you, Dr. John Dean. We're not bringing that up.
No, we're not. We're not. Regrets, I've had a few. But I was thinking about this because we spent a lot of time in the show talking about preparing for retirement. What do you do when you get there? How to invest, what to save, things like that, how to plan. But today, going to flip it around a little bit, because instead of asking what should I be doing like right now, the question is, what do people, and I'm kind of saying specifically retirees, wish they had done differently? And I think it's important to discuss this because these regrets, if you want to call them, tend to show up years after decisions are made, which is why I think understanding them now can potentially save you a lot of stress later on. And by the way, these are not things that we're guessing about. These regrets or whatever, the wishes, whatever you want to call them, were taken from several surveys done by such luminaries as, let's see, Lincoln Financial Group, Bankrate, the Trans-America Center for Retirement Studies annual study, hoity-toity, and the Employee Benefit Research Institute, EBRI. And we use EBRI quite a bit on this program. They have a lot of data. So these are some heavy hitters. And what's interesting, I think, about Rick, about these is how consistent these answers are across these different surveys. It's different ages, different backgrounds, but the same themes keep showing up in these surveys. So anyway, today we're going to go through the biggest regrets that retirees talk about, and more importantly, what you can do right now so you don't end up saying I regret these later on. So let's just dive into these, Rick. The first one here, this was the most common regret, which was on each survey, and they said, I wish I had saved more. I guess they regret not saving a lot. And I don't know how to parse this. Doesn't everyone kind of at some point wish they'd saved more?
Well, when you get old like me, you look back and say, yeah, I wish I could have saved more. But going back into and remembering the times, I didn't have too many options to save more. It wasn't like I was going out to dinner every night, blowing money, traveling around the world. I don't have that much in my history that I could really cut back on to have saved a lot more than I already did. I did save what I could. And I wish I could have saved more. But in reality, it would have had to come out of something that was a discretionary part of the budget. And that discretionary part of the budget we'd be traveling with the kids and, doing things like that I'm glad I didn't cut back on.
Yeah, but you have, at least over the last few decades anyway, done a fairly good job of saving.
I've saved where I can, and I'm not a pauper, but sure. But I'd rather have $10 million in the bank than X.
Well, that's it. And I think that everybody, even if you had $10 million, maybe you would think,
and I'd wish I had 20.
I wish I had 20. So, you know, this is a regret that they have. You have mentioned in the past, too, that some people wind up, as odd as this sounds, saving too much at the expense of maybe living a little bit better. You've seen that, right?
It's not the norm. That is not the most common outcome. But every once in a while, we run into somebody who's in their 50s, and they've never done anything. They've never traveled. They've never spent time, doing things. They just save. They save. Now, there's two problems with that. In that, they've got more money than they'll ever spend. They have no stories of life to fall back on. They didn't do anything, and because all they've ever done is save, they don't know how to enjoy themselves. It's kind of their DNA has just been made so they can't save. They can't spend it. And even in retirement, they can't spend it. Even when we can show them that they cannot run out of money. They just, it's not in them to spend. And so they don't enjoy the time they have. And so, but it's a fine line, because enjoying, in many cases, takes money. And some people enjoy too much and don't have the money to enjoy it later. So how much can you enjoy while you're building the portfolio to be able to enjoy it when you are not building it, but distributing it, but still have a life?
Well, as you said, it's not the norm, and for most people, I mean, the obvious solution to something like "I wish I'd saved more" is to, while you're saving, save more. But as you said, it's not always practical or possible to do that. But I think, Rick, what this shows is that the struggle for many people is just getting started.
That's the hardest part.
I wish I'd saved more, and I could have done it had I started, when I was 19 or 20 instead of 30 or whatever I was. Right. I missed out on that.
Yeah. I started saving when I was able to do the 401k. Now, I didn't have a 401k until I was in my mid to late 30s. And it started off with just the matching contribution, then moving up from there. It made it, and the hard part was, I may have been able to save more when I was younger, but it was hard. I didn't have any place to put it. I didn't have that discipline that takes it away from me before it hits my checking account. And since then, though, I've learned to have a little bit more of that discipline, save money on top of the 401k and other things, and build different portfolios. But I tell people all the time, the hardest part about accumulating and the hardest part about investing isn't picking the investment, whether you pick the S&P or the NASDAQ or one of those indexes. Which one to pick of that? Oh my goodness! Or do I pick just the top 50 of the S&P? What investment? It's not going to matter between those. The hardest part about investing is crowbarring the wallet out of your back pocket to be able to invest. Because even if you were to pick the best, if you didn't put any money, I picked it, but I didn't put any money into it. That did you no good. Just an example of what happened in the past. Doesn't mean anything's going to happen in the future. I don't know. But I'm just saying, you could pick a mediocre investment and put money into it and do better than picking the hottest investment and not putting any money into it. And just, having the wonderful attaboy that you picked a great investment, but you didn't put any money in it. That doesn't do you any good. You got to get the money out of your pocket.
And we've said so often, we've done the math too, that the people who start earlier do significantly better than the ones who delay it by 5 or 10 years. I won't do it here, but we've done that.
Well, you got the Goofus and Gallant. One of them saves $2,000 a year from age 20 to 30, and then doesn't save anymore. And the other one starts saving at 31 and saves from 31 to 60 to 65, and never catches up. Yeah. They're earning 10% a year or whatever it is. If you can earn that. This one that started later that saved 3.5 times as much money never caught up to the one that started early.
Yeah, and the one that started early stopped.
Compounding.
Yeah, the one that saved from age 20 to 30 stopped after that. They just let it ride for the next 35 years. So, it's just that's it. So I wish I'd saved more as a regret that they have, and that's hard to overcome. But start early, save often. So the next regret that people have, going down the list here, is that they wish they had documented a written financial plan. Now, I think this, according to these sources that we took this from, this was a top regret across all of them. Now,
well, when you have a plan, you tend to follow it and you tend to stay with it. If you don't have a plan, it's like, oh, I can do that tomorrow, and it doesn't get done. It's part of the savings aspect. It's part of that savings discipline. When I have a plan, when I have a strategy, when I have a list of to-dos that I follow, I do them. If I don't have those, I don't tend to do things, and things get sloughed off. And flexibility can be a great thing or a bad thing. For years, flexibility, life insurance, I'll take it back to that. Universal life, it was the most flexible policy, and a lot of them didn't work because it was the most flexible policy, and people decided, well, you mean I can skip this month? I don't have to put money in this month? Okay, I'm not going to put any money in this month. And then next month, the same thing happened. And pretty soon you're not putting any money into it and it falls apart. And then you wonder why this great investment didn't work. Because the flexibility, which was a wonderful selling point, killed it. And
you might recall I had one of those.
Having a plan of action keeps you on going on what you're doing.
Yeah, you might recall. Maybe you do. I had one of those.
I know you did. I didn't want to bring it up.
It was sold to me
when
I
you
was
were 23 or something like that.
I was 21. Yeah.
21.
Oh, and I dutifully put money in for about 3 months, and then I had like $2,000 of cash value. I don't know what it was, but anyway. Oh, well, it's still alive. I didn't have to put any money in. Anyway, it's exactly what you said. And here's the thing, though, having a written plan. I think for younger people, Rick, it might look more like, the plan might be more of written goals plus kind of a savings roadmap, where if you're closer to retirement, it becomes a little bit more detailed strategy. Would you agree?
Very much so. And the strategy becomes different when you change from an accumulation mode to a distribution mode. And I think it's very important when you have that distribution mode to know what you're doing, what's going on, what to expect, where to take the money from, where not to take the money from, so you can have the appropriate investments backstopping the needs that you have.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that's why I think this second regret goes hand in hand with the first one, because we said save early, save often, kind of as a joke, but it's really true. The younger you are, it's hard to really mess up a long-term savings plan if you do it consistently over 30, 40 years. But the plan really needs to take effect and take shape once you start taking the money out instead of putting it in. So, but that's a common regret. So we have two so far. Wish I'd saved more. Yeah, that's all of us. Wish I had a documented overall plan, and that's certainly one that people that don't have a financial advisor, I think, wish. The third regret here, the regret is I wish I had planned better for health care. And I mean, I think what they're talking about is long-term care, long-term health care.
Probably.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, though.
Well, it is. Medicare does not cover long-term custodial needs, as
Correct.
you know.
And depending on what state you're in, the Medicaid may or may not cover it at a certain level. I mean, some states you have to spend pretty much all of your assets down before they'll pay. Some states have a little bit higher resource limit. So depending on your state, your resource limits will change about how much money you can keep before the state will help pay for it. But still, do you really want to be on state aid? I mean, they say that the care is not different, but it is.
I've seen it. I've seen it with a relative of mine, and it was fine, but it just was kind of sad. And you've talked before, Rick, about the worst case scenario where one spouse needs care, they drain all their assets, and then the surviving spouse, once they die, they're left with less income and fewer assets. Yeah,
it's a death spiral financially that it's very difficult to overcome because of the emotions involved. And the problem is, long-term care used to be a much bigger part of, and using insurance to protect against long-term care, used to be much bigger part of an overall financial plan. But 15, 20 years ago, that's what we were talking about, and people were buying long-term care insurance more often. But the long-term care insurance providers woefully mismanaged or woefully miscalculated how much premium was needed. And so they just started jacking premiums up, 50, 80, 100+% from what the people were paying. And they were, jacking the premium up 10 years into the run. And the closer they were getting to long-term care need, the premium was going up skyrocketing to where people couldn't, and they were on fixed income, and they couldn't afford to keep the premiums going. And so a lot of people, unfortunately, had to really cut back on their coverage or lost their coverage because they just couldn't afford to keep paying the premiums. And so it's a much more difficult issue to solve. There are ways to do it that you can do it and know that you're not going to lose the coverage and know that the premium's not going to go up, but it doesn't have the same level of potential coverage that we thought we were getting 10, 20 years ago.
But
it covers the need. But
so the solution, I guess, to this regret is to plan by purchasing some kind of long-term care, possibly some kind of long-term care policy. But as you said, they're kind of expensive now.
Or by growing your assets as much as possible to pay for it.
That's hard to do, though, because you don't know.
But that takes risk or volatility as well, accepting volatility.
Yeah, and you don't know, first of all, when you're going to need it, and you don't know how much is going to be needed. You don't even know
if you're going to need it.
Well, that's the thing, and you pay for these expensive policies, and then neither one of you winds up needing it. And now, just very quickly, we used to talk about these so-called linked benefit policies.
And that's where most people are leaning nowadays. The linked benefits are typically in the annuity form now. Oh, no, I said the annuity word. But the idea is that you give an insurance company X amount of dollars. And so let's say I'll just use 100 as a round number. You give them 100,000, and assuming you qualified, they give you 300,000 for long-term care. And it's usually paid out over 5 or 6 years. So you get 50 or 60,000 a year over 5 years. So you put in 100, you get 300 if you need long-term care. But if you don't need long-term care, the 100's still there for either you during your lifetime or your heirs when you die. So it's not like, the original long-term care, which is more like your car insurance, where you paid a monthly or annual premium, and if you got in a car wreck, they'll fix your car, then jack your premium. But with long-term care, you pay the monthly premium. If you need long-term care, you get the premium or you get the benefit. But if you don't need long-term care, you don't get any premiums back either. So the long-term care with the annuity one, they can't raise your premium. And they can't cut your benefits. The benefits are what they are. The premium is what it is. So usually a one-time shot. So people carve off a piece of their portfolio, personal money, not IRA money for the most part, although it can be done the other way. And they just buy it, set it, and forget it. The problem is you don't want to do this when you're 45 because you're only getting 300,000, and from 45 to 75, you can probably more than triple the money of the 100,000 just by general investing. But you don't want to wait too long because then you may lose your ability to qualify for the coverage.
What's the sweet spot for coverage like that? Is it in maybe your mid-60s?
60s,
I don't know.
Yeah, 60, 65, 70.
Okay. All right.
Once you get past 70, you start losing your abilities to qualify. There's only like 8 or 9 questions, but you still have to answer those questions. And the older we get, the more prone to hypertension, more prone to problems.
Well, you mentioned that people are leaning this way. I've always kind of liked these types of policies, and we won't get too heavy into it because I don't have time for that. Maybe sometime we can talk a little bit more about those. But planning for healthcare, this is one of the things that you really should do, and it's something that a lot of people don't necessarily think about because they're just.
I see it also when it talks about healthcare. People that want to retire before 65. And they don't realize that they've got to get some health care from when they retire until Medicare kicks in. This is the traditional health care. And they're like, wow. They realize, well, wait, it's $1,000 a month for insurance or some number like that to cover it. That was not a part of the budget that I was expecting.
Well, as I had just to wrap up that part of it, the thing that I liked about those linked benefit was that the policies can be written where you can get at least your premiums back, and sometimes it can become like a life insurance policy. It'll pay off as a.
There can be life policies linked benefit. They're just more complex, and so they're harder.
There are different ways to do it. So anyway, so that's the third one, the planning for healthcare, and So the three so far were, just to recap what we have, the regrets. Wish I'd saved more. Wish I had an overall written plan, and wish I had planned better for healthcare. Two more regrets that came out of these surveys. And again, this is pretty much across each one of these surveys. So these are pretty common. The fourth regret that retirees have, at least that they stated, was, I wish I had learned more about personal finance. Now, that doesn't mean that they need to go to school and become a certified financial planner professional or anything like that. But it's the regret, I think, is not understanding certain nuances of planning. And an example that I sometimes give on this is taxes. And people who give, let's just give you an example. People who give money to a charity when they die, and they leave their personal money to the charity, and they give their IRA money to the kids.
Right, which is backwards, because the charity's not going to pay money on the IRA, but the kids are. The kids are not going to pay money
right.
or taxes on the inherited or the personal money, but neither is the charity. So it costs the kids money when it shouldn't. But just the basics, understanding the basics of investing, the basics of taxes. Those are things that should be taught, I think, in schools. Or maybe I should say no, because I am in this job. I am in this career for the last 40 plus years because I went to school and took an elective course on trying to learn the basics of stock bond investing, tax planning, and things of that nature. I thought that they were trying to teach college students the basics, that we need to have to be able to be successful in our personal life going forward. And what it was the first course in the Certified Financial Planning training curriculum. And at that point, I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a CFP. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I just took it because I figured, well, I'm not exactly sure what my life's going to be, but I want to know how to handle my financial side of my life. Mm-hmm. And it taught me that this is a career. Yay! Something I really like. And
you and me both. I when I first started doing this show, and this was back in the 90s or late 90s or whatever, I didn't know anything about all this stuff, and I picked it up by osmosis through all those years of sitting with you,
listening to Ray Robb and I.
yeah, we had the brain trust going on back then. But this was how I learned, and I thought, man, I really feel lucky to understand all this stuff and know how things like taxes can affect people. Which is going to tie into the fifth regret, by the way. But it's not so much knowing everything, but as you said, understanding things like tax brackets, understanding what happens when you do A, how does this affect you with B outcome, if I'm putting that correctly.
Right, and we're getting ready to do our taxes. Some of you have already done your taxes. I would say you should probably look at, I believe it's line 24, the line that says, this is your total tax. And that's how much you paid in taxes last year or for last year. Most people don't know that number. And I think that's an important number to know, that I didn't pay. You paid that much money in taxes. You may have gotten a refund of $2,000, $200, but that doesn't mean you didn't pay taxes. Look at the number that says, this is your total tax. It's somewhat eye-opening and disturbing.
Well, because people say, I didn't pay anything, I got a refund. Yeah, you did. You just paid too much. And take a look at how much you paid. That's one of the reasons I think that we have withholding out of our check, because people don't know how much they're paying, and they can't gripe about what they don't pay attention to. But of course, if you really don't want to know about personal finance or anything like that, so you can always hire a financial advisor like Professor Rick Plum, and they can take care of that stuff for you. Now, I said the fourth regret, fourth regret of the five tied into the fifth one. You mentioned taxes. Well, the fifth regret that came up among these surveys was, I wish I had protected more of my money from taxes. And this ties, I think, to financial literacy. Brackets, we talked about understanding brackets, what's taxable, and how certain decisions have a ripple effect. And you've said before, Rick, every action has a consequences. And taxes, I think, are often about timing, right?
Well, they are. And so I wish I would have built up more tax-efficient money, whether that be Roth or IRA or personal investment. That depends on your specific circumstance. And it comes back to the very first one. I wish I would have saved more. But no matter how you save, you want to save more. But once you get the discipline of saving, now you want to be efficient and tactful with the way you do it, so that you can have your money work even harder for you, so that it works better, and having it in the right accounts when you need it at the right time, so that it doesn't cost you too much in taxes, but it also didn't cost you too much to get it there.
Well, we've done, not too long ago, we've done do you do Roth, or do you do Roth 401k? Do you do traditional 401k? How much money do you put into the personal accounts and all this stuff? And most of those decisions are really tax-based when you get right down to it.
Right, because you've already decided you're going to save X. Now, what is the most efficient way to do it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's about paying. I mean, maybe you pay some now, you pay more later. One of the things that people tend to think is that, well, if I don't have to pay taxes now, I'd rather not. I'd rather push them off. I mean, why pay taxes now? This goes back to the idea of when you're taking money out of your, your taxable. I'm sorry, your qualifying, like your IRAs. Why would I ever take money out before I am absolutely required to do so at age 73 or 75 or whatever it's going to be? And this really ties into protecting your money from taxes.
Well, everything comes down to being as efficient with your money and keeping as much of your own money as possible. Whether it's keeping it by getting the deduction today or keeping it by making it tax-free in the future, which way gives me the best bang for my buck? And it does come down to expenses. How do I cut the expenses that I don't like in the first place, taxes being kind of at the top of that list, out of this equation? And not just one time, but for my whole life.
You've done talks about this, dipping into the IRA before you have to, and paying a little bit of tax now, or using up the tax bracket, which goes against what a lot of people's preferences or their psyche. How do you couch that to people and tell them, pay some tax now because you'll avoid a whole bunch of taxes potentially later on?
Well, earlier today, I was talking with a client, and we were going over their tax return, and we were saying, okay, you are in a true 12% tax bracket, and you've got X amount of dollars in your 401k, IRA, tax-deferred accounts. You have said that you don't need this money ever during your joint lifetimes. So the only issue is your RMDs, and that's still a few years away. But you might want to start taking it out and paying 12% on it today, and at least to some degree. Because when is this money going to get spent? This money is going to get spent when one of you passes away. And unfortunately, one of them has a health issue that means that there's probably going to be a survivor period for a number of years. And so it's a matter of, okay, now the survivor, let's look at what their tax bracket's going to look like. One of the Social Securities goes away. This pension goes away. So they're going to require, right now, you don't need any money from the 401k, from your investment portfolio as a whole. You don't need anything. Your pensions and 401 or your pensions and Social Security cover it. But when one of you passes away and the income drops, it's going to drop to a point where the survivor needs to start taking distributions. And guess what's going to happen? It looks like this on their tax return. And now they're no longer in the 12% bracket. They're going to be paying 22% or more for that distribution. Let's pay 12% today. Start moving money to a Roth over the next series of years so that when they have to touch that money, there's not that much money left to take out of in the 22%, and they have tax-free available money too. Much more efficient, and they agreed.
And that's how things get explained. It helps to know that money inside of an IRA is going to be, when it's taken out, and it will be at some point because it has to be, it will be taxed. It's just a question of how much. And if you can get away with paying something, on the order of 0 or 12, I would rather do that than pay 22, 24, or 30, whatever the other one is. So the 5 regrets. So we're about out of time here. Just to recap here: wish I'd saved more. Wish I had a written plan. Wish I'd planned better for health care, long-term care, that kind of thing. Wish I had learned more about personal finance, which ties into taxes. And the last regret, which is I wish I protected more of my money from taxes. These are certainly not all the regrets, but these are the most common ones. And as I look at these real quick, Rick, I mean, they're all fairly, I don't want to say easily solvable, but they are solvable to a certain degree. Would you agree?
Well, it's all a matter of doing something, being proactive about it, and not just being an ostrich, putting your head in the sand. I know that's cliche, but and thinking that tomorrow I'll deal with it tomorrow. Some things actually take planning, take discipline, take doing something up front to make it better later on. And these areas, finance is one of those areas. Unless you just know you're going to inherit $20, $30, $40 million later on, you need to pay attention to what's going on.
And if you are going to do that, you got a whole other
you got another set of problems. That's wonderful problems, but problems.
Well, good. That's right. More money, more problems, or whatever that phrase is. By the way, none of this is about beating yourself up for what you did or did not do in the past. The people we talked about today, as we kind of said at the top, they made the best decisions they could with the information and with the funds that they had available at the time. But the common thread is pretty clear that the people who feel most confident in retirement usually have some kind of plan. They understand how their income worked. They thought about taxes and healthcare and how long their money needed to last, all that stuff, where their cash flow is coming from. So, and the good news is, by the way, if you're listening to this today, you still have time to make good decisions. It doesn't matter if you're 5 years from retirement or 20 or 30 or 40. I mean, there are ways to protect yourself with this. And by the way, these are exactly the kinds of conversations, as Rick just alluded to a moment ago, that the advisors at Lucia Capital Group have with their clients every single day. It's not just how much you've saved, but it's how it's structured and how it's going to be used and how to help avoid these regrets that we've been talking about today. And if you're not really sure whether your plan accounts for things like taxes, income, healthcare, or whatever, the realities of retirement, it's worth having that conversation. Give the advisors at Lucia Capital Group a call, 800-644-1150. 800-644-1150. You know that phone number by now. If you've been listening for a while, you know that Professor Rick Plum heads up the financial planning department and works together with people, the whole team actually, reviewing plans and strategies, making sure all the pieces fit the way that they should. This can get complicated, but you certainly do not have to figure it out on your own. Don't forget to visit luciacap.com, LUCIACAP.com. You get information on everything we talked about on the show. And, of course, our full library of downloadable guides, free guides, retirement planning, Social Security, estate planning. Let's see, what am I missing?
We're working on a rollover one.
That's right. That's right. The rollover guide, which should, I think by the time this airs, it better be available because we talked about it last week. So we just want to make sure it's all updated. It's been a while since we were able to talk about it. But you're right. That's right. The rollover guide. Anyway, just type that into the search bar and it'll come up. Download it and take a look at it. I think you'll find it helpful. And of course, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Do not miss an episode. We're out of time. How about that? Well, my thanks as always to Professor Rick Plum, certified financial planner professional and accredited wealth management advisor. I am your podcast host, Johnny Dean. This is Managing Your Financial Future. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. We'll talk with you all again next week. The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. These materials are provided for general information and educational purposes based upon publicly available information from sources believed to be reliable. The information in these materials may change at any time and without notice, and its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. There is no guarantee that any investment strategy will meet its stated objective. All investments involve risk, including potential loss of principal. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There's no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. A plan participant leaving an employer typically has 4 options and may engage in a combination of these options. 1. Leave the money in their former employer's plan, if permitted. 2. Roll over the assets to their new employer's plan if one is available and rollovers are permitted. 3. Roll over to an IRA. Or 4. Cash out the account value. Roth IRA distributions of principal from a Roth IRA are tax-free. However, any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59.5 or within 5 years of the date
the Roth IRA was established, whichever is longer. Distributions of principal from a Roth 401k are tax-free. Any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59 and a half or within 5 years of the date the Roth 401k was established, whichever is longer. Your investment options are limited with the Roth 401k to those offered by the plan administrator. Charges and fees may be incurred. The S&P 500 is a stock market index tracking the stock performance of 500 of the largest companies listed on stock exchanges in the United States. Indexes are unmanaged and cannot be invested indirectly. The NASDAQ Composite Index measures all NASDAQ domestic and non-U.S. based common stocks listed on the NASDAQ stock market. The market value, the last sale price multiplied by total shares outstanding, is calculated throughout the trading day and is related to the total value of the index. Indexes are unmanaged and cannot be invested indirectly. Stock investing includes risks including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. Bonds are subject to market and interest rate risk if sold prior to maturity. Bond values will decline as interest rates rise. Bonds are subject to availability, change in price, call features, and credit risk. Long-term care coverage policies and provisions may not be available in all states. Approval may be subject to the terms and conditions of the insurance company. Insurance product guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company and are subject to their terms and conditions. Annuity protection guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at www.ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. Rick Plum is a registered representative with, and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. Any other individual or company mentioned in this podcast are not affiliated with or endorsed by Lucia Capital Group or LPL Financial. LPL Financial Insurance License number 0518721. LPLIA Insurance License number 0B91442.